They want to fight.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Fight.
So when it comes to something like theatre, people think about West End or Broadway, about what is commercially successful. But if you look at the number of works in Singapore that have been very resonant for mainstream audiences, look at the numbers.
They scared me. What a rapid fire round. That was crazy.
It really comes down to the point of like, what are we judging as success here? It's freaking fantastic, the stuff that we have out there, but not enough people know about it.
Maybe we could put a social media campaign right before it happens.
But you know something, baby, I have to say something on behalf of these companies.
Welcome back to another episode of Bloomer Pulse. My name is Chow, and here I am with three amazing artists because today we're actually talking about arts and culture. Before we dive into that, quick intros, please. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm an actor and a content creator.
Hello, I'm Xiao Ting. I'm a theatre actor and director.
Hi guys, I'm Thomas K. I'm a content creator and freelance producer, scriptwriter.
Okay, so we are all kind of in the arts industry, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially the both of you over there, I
Yeah,
feel.
I wouldn't call what I'm doing art. I'm posting stupid videos on TikTok and Instagram.
Actually, yeah, I struggle to say that.
I think nowadays sometimes that's more art than you think.
Really?
I don't know.
You're being very kind to us right now.
I hold art at a pedestal again.
Oh my gosh.
Theatre, acting, and my parents do music as well. So I'm like,
That's
I need to
cool.
respect
Yes.
that field.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally true. So today we are going to discuss this statement. Is locally produced art in Singapore worse than cultural imports from overseas? Dun, dun, dun. Honestly, it's a very sharp statement.
I'm a cultural import.
Oh, it's actually true.
I did not expect
Is he worth
that.
it?
I'm a cultural
Is this
import.
guy worth it? And we have two camps, of course. The first team, Thomas and I, will be in the affirmative team. So we agree with the statement.
Oh, perfect.
You basically say you're better than
Yeah,
all
it's
of
my
us.
camp. Hey, never mind. We will explain it later.
And Xiao Ting and Valerie are going to be in the opposing team. Mm-hmm. How do y'all feel about that?
Ready.
I'm super excited. But what I'm looking forward to actually is hearing the points that you guys come up with and seeing if we can convince you otherwise.
They want to fight.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Fight. Each team will have 5 minutes to present their arguments, and we are going to start first. Thomas, you ready?
You can take it. Yeah, you can start it off.
I'm going to start on a very macro level. I think just looking at how the Singapore economy is and where we put our budget, it is very different when we look at arts and other industries. So to give you some numbers, Singapore is looking to inject $100 million to boost arts and culture over the next 4 years. And this funding aims to strengthen various aspects of the arts sector. So increasing the access to arts, building more robust arts ecosystem, and letting more people be able to engage in arts and culture. It may seem very optimistic, but when you compare the numbers, Singapore is actually spending $1.3 billion on businesses to help businesses manage rising costs, and $3 billion for AI and finance. So if you look at that number alone, the disparity shows us just what Singapore is focusing on. It's very difficult for the arts industry to thrive in Singapore if we don't have enough budget spent there to help support these people and to build an ecosystem that will help to run itself too. And I also want to talk about how Singaporeans are not very supportive of their own locally produced artists. To give you a very simple understanding of this, when was the last time you caught a local film in the cinemas? If you look at the box office numbers, you can very quickly tell the disparity between the types of movies that do well and don't. And a lot of times, we do have many locally produced films, but I've heard it from people in the industry about how they don't actually aim to get massive numbers in the box office, and a lot of times they are just trying their very best, right, to break even. And that is a huge disparity because they're not even in it to make profits.
To build on that, I'm glad you mentioned macro also. So I'm going to talk about why, art is just not a local thing anymore. It is more of a global phenomenon when we talk about locally produced being worse than a culturally imported thing, right? Because all art is now judged on a global basis, right? And we cannot compete with global, like as Singaporeans, right? Singapore's population is only 5.6 million, a very small pool size to curate amazing talent. And art is something that is now a global fight because of social media, and it's on the technological age where we see all these global works. And so every artist that we judge is on a global level. Hence, some people might not support local as much because it is very clear. Like if I just go up to someone and ask, name me 10 Singaporean artists versus naming 10 foreign artists, it's clear who's made their mark in the industry and who's still lagging behind. Okay, so my second point would then be, we're not even set up for success. Okay, building on the fact that the investments are there, right? Our education system does not incentivize arts. Okay, sure, we can have the infrastructure, but one must go far and beyond to achieve a sustainable career in things outside of the norm. So it's natural that our parents and society would force us to lean towards the stable, linear paths of, let's say, being a doctor, an engineer, lawyers, which leans back to point one again, even less talent pool to pick from. Let me give you a great example of a slightly controversial cultural import, okay? Joseph Schooling, right? Oh, he seems Singaporean, but no. At 13, he had to move to Florida to train with a world-class coach. Only then, when we exported him out, then we import him back in after he won the gold. So technically, he's still a cultural import. But never mind, that is just one example so that people can kind of understand. But let's talk about artists here. Another example, look at Singapore Symphony Orchestra, okay? One of the first person tasked to set it up is a person named Chu, a Singaporean who had conducted for Athens and a radio in Greece. So again, his accolades were only acknowledged once he went overseas, hence becoming a cultural import. And what does that say when he came back and he said that it will take 15 years to form this orchestra to attain world standards, and that this initial team of Singapore Symphony Orchestra musicians was 27 foreigners to the only pioneer batch of 8 Singaporeans, okay? So even now, there's actually a good amount of foreigners who are in our orchestra and who have then converted to Singapore citizenship. Okay, so my last point then is, why does it matter whether we are globally successful or not, right? Because Singapore, we can just appeal to our audience, right? So if the locals like my work, we should be fine. But it doesn't work like that because it's very much tied with the economy. So look at how much money the government is investing into bringing a Taylor Swift in. Right? How much tourism that brings in. We can't say the same for our artists, and they cannot generate that kind of traffic even regionally. But there are anomalies in every situation, of course. So guess who did it? JJ Lin. It's the same thing with him. He was exported out, prove his success overseas, then come back in. And that's the thing. Even Singaporean-bred talents must gain their acknowledgement overseas, and once we see that they're back in SG, as a cultural import, do we start realizing their worth. But let me say something, as much as we are against, it is not a bad thing. Right? Because we should realize that actually all of us are cultural imports, right? The whole heritage behind Singapore, like the Chinese, Malays, Indians, we all came together to create and add value and flavor into our national rojak. So without this, we cannot continue progressing in the ways that we have, and without acknowledging, we will lack in various aspects. And now for art, we cannot push ourselves to achieve even more.
All right, and our time is up. We're going to move over to the next team.
I will attempt to answer your argument with one main point. The main point being, what seems like worse is actually great talent that is stifled and beset by an unconducive environment, which creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. So this disagrees with the topic statement, which assumes that the locally produced art is worse. But what I'm trying to say that it is not worse. It is great. It is talented. It is colorful. It is just not given the right environment to truly self-actualize, which means intrinsically it exists and it has value. So for example, structural issues and their impact, this can manifest through lack of funding, support, opportunity, awareness. So let me paint you a picture. A lack of opportunity. A talented writer with a Hollywood-level script sitting in their drafts. He has to write a compromised version that doesn't really reflect what his artistic heart wants to make, resulting in a product that the audience views that does not truly reflect his talent. So it exists, but the environment stifles it. Now I'll give you a second example, and this can be a very applicable story to many different kinds of artists in different mediums in Singapore. A potential, let's say, Meryl Streep could be walking amongst us right now. But she wasn't encouraged to nurture this talent growing up in the education system. And even if they did pursue it, they might be demoralized by the lack of societal support. Their parents say, why you pursue something so unrealistic? Even if she is still gifted and she pursues acting, this is the best performance I've ever seen in my whole life, right? The lack of platforms also make it hard to be recognized, you see. So the environment fails to do justice to the locally produced art by stifling its true potential. And then also we have subpoints like privilege and access. So the onus is on the person to seek out their own opportunities and education in a field like this. And this requires a level of privilege. We can have a whole other conversation about intersectional privilege. But basically, the access is not equal. There's also societal and educational factors, which the affirmative team also brought up. The points that they brought up, while valid, do not indicate a lack of talent or do not indicate a lower level of quality. Rather, it bolsters my point that the environment just does not allow it to self-actualize. So conservative values, prioritizing stable jobs in STEM fields, top-down influence, discouraging children to explore value to arts, creating a generation of both artists and audiences that do not know how to appreciate, do not know how to pursue. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. I will now hand the time over to Xiao Ting.
So that was a really good opening by my partner over here. So I think what I want to really dive into is the fact that better or worse is very subjective, because what she's talking about is that it carries an inherent assumption of value. value. So in this case, I'll talk about what is value to Singaporeans when we talk about this topic. Firstly, you think about quality. So when it comes to something like theatre, people think about West End or Broadway, about what is commercially successful. But if you look at the number of works in Singapore that have been very resonant for mainstream audiences, look at the numbers. I'm telling you, people want our local works. People are excited. In fact, there's such a demand that there's a culture of restaging, which not a lot of places have. But we do. Secondly, I want to talk about IP, Singaporean content for Singaporeans. Sure, we all love renditions of Phantom of the Opera or immersive walkthroughs of Harry Potter, but I think that I can feel a tangible cultural shift in terms of people wanting to watch Singapore stories about Singaporeans, and that's not just the point. I think that people love the work, they love the stories, and they happen to be Singaporean because the work is good. So, for example, last year I was in a show called Four Horse Road, where it was essentially like a punch-drunk version, but people felt really connected to the content because they were seeing the history of Singapore up close and personal. This year, Secondary, the musical by Checkpoint Theatre, wow, blew so many people's minds. How can we ever say that we're not good enough? In fact, I think we're better. My third point is numbers. So this morning, I went to the National Arts Council 2022 Population Survey on the Arts, and it states that the top 3 reasons why Singaporeans want to support local content is they're interested in the content, they want to support local artists, and of course, this is the part that I have a bit of a question mark, it's free and affordable. I think that what happens is that Singapore and local content has the stay factor, meaning to say, if I convert you, you stay. If I bring you in, you stay. This is something that only our arts can do. But generally, I really think that Singaporeans are proud of our arts. You know, music, dance, visual arts, traditional arts, theatre. Sure, there is this myth that is being perpetuated that you have to go overseas to prove your worth. But you know what? If it makes you more resilient, why not? And so finally, I think that what I want to ask is that who are the ones that perpetuate the myth that Singapore arts is lesser than cultural imports? Perhaps not explicitly, but for example, if you look at tangible things like resources, are you investing in the local arts as much, if not more, than your overseas talents?
Those were really cool points. I think it was very eye-opening. Like, legit, I'm not even trying to be nice or whatever. I thought it was...
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It was pretty...
That's all right.
What are you doing? I'm not going to waste time, but yes. Something that I noted is that you did talk about how we may have a Meryl Streep just walking the streets. She may be amongst us. And what you were talking about is a potential, right? That there is this potential. But a potential is a hypothesis. And what value is there in the hypothesizing that there is going to be a better talent than foreign imports if it doesn't actually come true, if it doesn't actually have the opportunity to see the light. And I feel like, yes, though there may be a potential, I could then go on to hypothesize that there's a potential for Singapore to have a much more vibrant AI space too. And I feel like there's just no value in talking about that potential if it doesn't actually show its worth. It's very cool. We have local productions that people are really going for. And as people within the theatre space, I'm sure you know that there is more interest now. People are really looking to support local productions. I also wonder whether or not it's a bit of a bubble where maybe because you're in the space, you are so well aware about this, and amongst just the general population in Singapore, are we supporting these local acts as much? And are we really doing that? Because it really brought me to think about whether or not our theatre industry is profitable or has a bright future. And when you just search up Theatre Singapore future, one of the top articles that comes up really is about whether or not we will be able to have a profitable industry in Singapore, and how NAC is really keeping the arts community afloat, but there are a lot of theatre companies that are still projecting revenue losses. And I don't know whether or not this is something that we will be able to change. If it's not revenue generating in the long run, will it be sustainable, and can it provide the space to grow and nurture talent in the arts and culture industry? Just one more thing. I also want to talk about how Singapore, yes, is very culturally diverse, and we do have different cultures, different heritage, but at the same time, we're a very, very young country. And I think that affects a lot about how Singapore is able to build their own identity and build their own stories, which then develops into all the arts and culture that we want to communicate to people. I feel like right now, a lot of the culture that we have is imported and is based off someone else's culture. So if you look at the food that we like, the songs that we listen to, and the movies that we watch, a lot of them are very influenced by more foreign cultures rather than our own local communities. I'm going to hand it over to this guy.
I think you got most of the points. If anything, I'll just build on them a little bit. Local productions versus cultural imports, right? Like, I would say I'm aware of how good Secondary was as a theatre production, right? But look at the numbers secondary brings in versus a cultural import like
Taylor Swift?
No, not Taylor Swift, but let's say like Lion King, right? Theater versus theater lah. So Lion King brings in the numbers that our society can almost like respect. It really comes down to the point of like, what are we judging as success here? We as artists, we can look at the performance and we can judge that as success and say, hey, this might be better than a cultural import. But as per a societal standpoint, as per, we are built on meritocracy as a country, right? So what are the merits? If we bring in a global or cultural import, a piece from international down to Singapore versus a Singapore-produced content, which one is bringing in more value to our economy, to our society? On that point, which was the fact that we're creating Singapore works for Singaporeans, right? So if I'm looking at, the fact that we have such a small demographic size, if we look at a painting, for example, it needs to then become very, very expensive for it to be sustainable for the artist, because there's such a niche pool of people who will buy into this crowd now, right? Otherwise, it becomes something that, hey, I need to make sure that I have a lot of audience coming for something that I like. For example, a singer, right? So someone like maybe Ben King could do it, but he's like one in so many artists trying to do the same versus any cultural kind of like regional artists coming over. They can pull in those numbers easy, if not in mass, versus a regular kind of indie artist here who probably cannot sell out a stadium or even a smaller kind of place to sustain their salary.
So thank you for that. The affirmation team brought up the example of JJ Lin and how one has to go overseas to make it. While the case study is correct, I interpret this differently. Not acknowledging local talent until it's validated overseas is not a reflection of the quality of art, but more so of the audience's internal biases. So Thomas also mentioned there being niche audiences. These examples do not disprove the topic statement. We must remember that public perception is malleable and that we can influence it. It bolsters the statement that there is quality art here, but the environment here we have does not recognize it. Audiences included, we have to hold ourselves responsible. So Chow also mentioned that my argument was limited by outlining examples in which people have potential, and hence I will provide solid case studies of local artists who have made it and are very likely, and this is important, a microcosm of the broader talent that is likely to exist here if we had a better environment for these artists. And also, an even more important metric, the international recognition, local reception to local art. So international acclaim, we have Crazy Rich Asians, which featured Singaporean actors and showcased their talent on a global scale. Now, before they were validated by Crazy Rich Asians, were they already not talented actors who existed here? Second, Nathaniel Ong, a local actress, secured roles in West End productions on Broadway. Boom. So we have JJ Lin, which is also a great example. He needs no introduction. Grace Ling, a local designer, gained international recognition as a fashion designer, and she studied in Singapore, in NAFA. Now that we have proven that part, with the international recognition, a much more important metric, in my opinion, is local reception, because local art was made for the locals. Like how a Singaporean would not be able to appreciate Hamilton, as much as, let's say, something that was catered to us, I would think that local recognition is important to discuss. So, for example, theatre shows like Hotel, Psycho Beach, Fag Hag, all these popular shows at Wild Rice Theatre and many other theatres, Sing Theatre, they all have very popular shows that sell out quickly. I know for a fact people like it so much that they will stand outside the theatre to maybe get a standing ticket. And that is already within the niche audience that is aware of the art. So imagine how much more popular it could be if we had an environment that would push this art out to more people. Because growing up, I didn't even know of these arts, but I do now, and I am a huge fan. So imagine more audiences just simply being able to appreciate it. And they're also highly praised for their writing, acting, and overall production. They have won numerous local awards, the Singapore Theatre Awards, the Writing Awards. Alvin Saha is a highly accredited playwright. Local adaptations of shows from overseas is also staged in Singapore, and they also sell out, and they draw large audiences.
I think that there's lots of food for thought from everybody, but I think I want to address this part about investment in the arts specifically, because I think that what you're looking at on the timeline is slightly different, which is you're seeing places reap the benefits of investing in the arts maybe 30, 40 years ago, and now you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. I can see right now in Singapore the investment in the arts within the infrastructure to nurture the next generation. For example, Singapore on a policy level has many grant schemes that allow school children to access the arts, all kinds of arts, not just theatre. Everyone watches it. And as an actor, I can tell you the most important work I do, assembly shows, because every kid watches them. preschool to primary school to secondary school, even at the tertiary level, every kid accesses them. So I can say that right now there's a lot more resources put into things like that allow the arts to be accessed by more people. Why are they doing this if not for the fact they believe in the potential of local arts? Let me talk about opportunities for emerging artists. So the street that I'm talking about is Waterloo Street, which is the arts belt in Singapore. So you're looking at organizations like Prisma, which has Permisi, which is a developmental platform for dancers. You're looking at Objectives, Center for Photography and Film, where they have this thing called Young Photographers Mentorship Program. There is Practice Tuck Shop, where I work at, which has an artist in residence. There's Center 42, which has an unsolicited scripts program with Wild Rice. There's so much going on. It's so vibrant and so exciting. And all of these require resources that can only be made possible if someone believed in what's going to come out from all of that. And finally, I think there's been a lot of talk about numbers in terms of money, in terms of I guess actual humans turning up for stuff. I want to talk about numbers in terms of impact. When, say, Ben King creates a piece of work, sorry, I use him because you bring him as an example. It's not just him at the forefront and him singing, it's an entire creative team that he brings with him that you don't really think about, but every single person in that ensemble is important, and they're all Singaporeans, I think.
All right, time's up. What a rapid fire round. That was crazy. I could feel them just bullet training through the whole thing. I thought that was a very good discussion about the current space and the current arts and culture scene that we have here. And I think we all want to know what we can do next. So how can we help to reduce cultural apathy and inertia amongst Singaporeans towards local arts and culture? What do you think about that?
I think we need a dual strategy for something like this. So we need to nurture not just the artists, but the audiences as well. So the first point would be education and awareness. We should incorporate arts into education and change the narrative to view arts as valuable to a well-rounded education and for life as well. We need to expose students to local artists and integrate their works into the curriculum to build appreciation from a young age. And I know so because that was done a little bit for me when my teacher put in local writers into our literature. And then I started doing double takes when I saw their names on productions, and I'm more interested to go look at it now. Imagine what a wide impact that could be if that was actually forced into the curriculum. The second is a dual strategy for exposure. The first is to make local talent accessible. So we create platforms for local talent to be showcased widely. Media houses to showcase local talents so they have a fighting chance to build organic local fan base. And then we need to nurture audiences as well. So yes, we say all this talk about, we train the best actors, we do the best singers, blah, blah, blah. But okay, what about the audiences? So we need to develop an environment that encourages people to want to seek out the art and who knows how to appreciate the local work to begin with, to appreciate art. You put the best poem in the world in front of someone who does not care about poetry, that doesn't work, right? So it has to be a dual strategy. So I think we do have world-class talent, and by addressing these structural issues from the root, from the top down, right, we might be able to break the cycle and allow a new era of Singaporean artists to thrive, what we could call the Singaporean Renaissance. Thank you.
And first of all, roots, then top down. What are you saying? No, but okay, you say you feel like there needs to be a lot more educating, right? I think that brings up one of our initial points, which is I think a lot of your conversation is we need to influence them, we need to change them, we need to this and that, which to me just proves that it is not here. It might be better in the future, but it is not here. And the same way as how, for example, an established art house like Singapore Symphony is now set up, right? It requires the cultural imports to come in and teach us, and we take experience from there, and then we start growing and progressing. And that's essentially how Singapore is built also, right? We bring in all these different people of different cultures, all these immigrants to create the country that we are now in order to keep progressing, right? So look at other countries regionally, even Thailand. It's you don't need to convince anyone. It's huge. Everyone in the country will flock towards it. But over here, we have this anti-support local kind of thing slightly still going on, which is why I feel we can't say...
You think there's that?
Yeah, and I will also build on your side, which I do feel sure, I'm in the media scene as well, so I'm aware of all these productions going on, but we are definitely in a bubble. We can go up to regular strangers on the street and ask 20 of them who knows that the theatre show Secondary is ongoing right now. I would guess 15 of them are going to have no idea what that is, right? And
don't
sure,
talk about Hamilton.
That is a problem Valerie has mentioned. That is a problem. But which also just proves the point that we are not there yet. The other point is, right, when you say that we should start integrating into programs, into schools and stuff like that, way more into becoming a norm, into becoming something as equally valuable as the conventional kind of education, I would say that let's not lie to ourselves, okay? Singapore is very practical. We need to look at the mean or the average of any job. when I ask my child to go and pursue any job, right, I'll look at the mean or the average, right? I think that's what people are thinking. That's why go to engineering. Even if you are not the best engineer, you're an average engineer, 5K per month, 6K per month, not too bad. If you are an average artist, you can eat rice, no meat, no fish, stay vegan. It's going to be tough, right? The average artist versus the average any job is always going to suffer. And I feel like that's where we are at now in the local scene. The last point that I just kind of want to mention is the local audience and demand. Singapore stuff for Singapore audience, fantastic. But our local demand is not enough to fuel us to become regionally and globally great yet.
Yeah.
If we don't have the platforms, right, that you're mentioning, wow, they're sold out. I am impressed that they're sold out. But why are we not getting bigger venues then? There must be some kind of reason whether the productions of these theaters are not confident in getting a bigger venue because the demand isn't met or the pre-orders aren't met. Or I'm not sure why, but if it's not that, then
it's a cost thing.
So why can't the costs be covered if the demand is there, right? Why
Because
can
no
we
matter
get...
how much you charge for a ticket price, it will never be enough to cover the compensation for people to pay fairly, genuinely. So in other words, the houses are determined by math because they're not commercial. So what you're looking at are
Right.
two different business models. You're looking at commercial places like when Lion King comes or when
Yep.
Hamilton comes
Yep.
versus, say, when I talked about Forest Road. That's non-profit. I would say that the venue thing, I agree with your points actually so far. But I think with regards to the capacity part, that's the one that it's a different business
Okay,
model.
so let's just discuss
altogether.
on this point a little
Yeah.
bit because I'm also curious, right?
Yeah.
So is there any for-profit production? Would secondary be a for-profit theatre production?
No,
then?
it's
That
not
one?
because it's
also
still a
not.
non-profit. You know how long they rehearse? They rehearse 2 months.
Yeah.
And you have to pay X number of full-time actors for 2 months. It's very expensive because you've got musicians, you've
Yeah.
got tech, you've got crew, you've got a full-time staff. That amounts to a lot of resource. Plus, in Singapore, space is the most expensive. We can't rehearse in a warehouse, you see.
Yeah.
They have to find a venue for that. And under arts housing in Singapore, that's another complicated thing that
Okay, let's just take something like Hamilton, for example, which
Yeah.
is going on now, right? It's the most recent one I can think of. So Hamilton, for example, is a for-profit. They book a very expensive venue, and they are expected to get profit out of that.
because they
Would I
tour
say?
the world.
Right.
So meaning to say, even if they don't make a profit here, they can make a profit elsewhere. The math is different. I
Okay,
suspect.
I'll do a quick point there. Then why
Yeah.
would they even do a stop in Singapore? There must be some kind of value to come here, no?
Maybe it's not their choice entirely, but maybe the programmers at MBS need a foreign talent in that
Right.
sense to anchor the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
That drives one point towards culturally import. I guess that's one thing. I'll ask another question.
Yeah.
Was LKY,
The musical.
the musical, was that for profit?
I think Singapore Repertory Theatre is a non-profit company.
Right. Because they did it at MBS as well.
Yes.
Right. And
Did.
I
Okay,
'cause
so what I'm
just
saying,
trying
I
to-
think we're doing
like-
two different
right.
things, right? So there's the idea of a non-profit company versus whether the show itself turn profits.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you. Something like LKY turn profits.
Right.
Right.
So
Probably.
why I
don't know,
mentioned
I'm not from
yeah.
SRT.
Okay. But of course, why I mentioned LKY is because they're held at the similar venues, right?
Yes.
Like Lion King when it came to Singapore and where LKY the theater was the musical was done was
Yeah.
at the same venue. So now I'm saying okay, since it's the same venue, it will be the same costings perhaps, and then sure you need to pay the actors and whatever, but then which one are people deeming as having more value in terms of money and stuff like that? But okay those two are at least, one is local and one is imported. So that's the kind of questions I have.
And also, when we bring up Hamilton, a show turning a profit, right? I will say that this also goes towards the point of which audience are we talking about. See, because me as a Singaporean, right, I'm just going to be so honest, right? I know people are going to tag me, but then when I was watching Hamilton, right, I did not do reading on the story. I was so lost. I can honestly say that I enjoyed other local shows more than Hamilton. But I did the reading afterwards. It's a great show. It's all very talented, okay? So don't come for me.
No, I mean, I'll talk for that point, right? I would 100% enjoy secondary way more than Hamilton because Hamilton is based off of American history
Yeah.
and secondary is for ourselves. But then if we're looking at the metric of how are we judging success to a lame person, not just the fact that we are media people or we are, invested in the arts and culture scene, right? It can't just be an intangible asset anymore. It cannot be I go into a maths test and I'm a very good mathematician, but it's just that the O-level one very hard, then I cannot,
Yeah.
Like, if I score 50 and the other guy scores 70, right? He's better. How are we judging this metric of success? It can't be something intangible to the average person.
So I can agree with you on that, but I think just the interpretation of what the metric should be is different. So I don't think international recognition can be a true metric to judge the intrinsic
It's
value of
one of
art.
the
It's one
metrics.
of, but
Yeah.
it cannot be the
Yeah.
main one because
Yes.
we also need to acknowledge that not every artist has the same access to worldwide fame. You see, even though they may be a worldwide like level and caliber artist.
Yeah, that's
you see?
fair.
So we also need to consider all like, the privileges, the fact that we are, in Singapore, the audience size. Are we the ones leading Western media? But then what can we do to help it? I think that, again, right, it goes back to the dual strategy of cultivating an environment that would start to think this way. Like, we don't just hop on the train just because something is very famous somewhere else. And hence, okay, then I understand that it's human nature to seek the path of least resistance. So if everyone is talking about this show, then then I'm more likely to want to see this show. I'm more likely to like this show because it has like gotten like social proof from everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that what's the path forward? How can we help this situation? Changing the narrative about, art in Singapore. It's not some frivolous thing that people do,
Yeah.
It's actually something that's integral to your spiritual, emotional life, you see.
I think you talk a lot about education and how we need to nurture students to believe in this space and to want to be interested in it as well. You talked about literature books being written by local writers, and I actually really resonate with that because when I read local literature books, it also made me feel like, oh, there are local writers. Growing up in school, we were given these books to study in our curriculum already. And
Like
that-
Mr. Midnight.
No, I mean, yes, but no.
What? Not art, man. That's my kind of art lah.
I like it too.
my literature book was like Emily of
Such a
Emerald Hill.
throwback.
I don't know. You had that also? Okay, so that was that.
I speak for the My Tribe one. Those cannot read book one. That's me.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
No, I like Mr. Midnight also. True Singapore Ghost Stories also.
Yeah?
That one made me scared,
That one
Expand
good.
your palette. You see, this is still local talent.
SG Lit.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you see, the thing is, right, we can talk about books that we've grown up with, books that were in our curriculum already. And it does go to show that we have been having, say, like assembly sessions in school. Like some of my most memorable assembly sessions in school were the drama productions. Like those were so much fun. When they had those shows, I would always be so much more attentive during assembly. I actually wouldn't fall asleep. So what goes to say that we haven't already been doing these strategies? And how effective have they been so far? If they have been effective, how come at this present state now, we're still in a space where maybe people still doubt the arts and culture in Singapore?
In some ways, trying to compile what I believe can happen to make everyone's lives better because we have so many different types of metrics, right?
Yeah.
I think that what you talk about, like say Hamilton, the difference is the long-running show. So for example, when you go on Broadway, the shows last like 4 or 5 months, and what it does is it gives people jobs. And I think that's what's going to turn the needle, is when people feel like it's a viable source of livelihood. And I'm not just talking about actors. I'm talking about everybody putting that show together. So about 50 to 60 people of musicians, crew, cast, directors, actors, writers, all kinds of disciplines coming together to put that up. And then you're looking at the stability of income for a long period of time, not just like a 2-week run.
I 100% agree with that. Then it goes back down to demand and supply and economics, right?
Yeah, and
But
then
whether
you'll
or
bring
not
in the
we
tourist
have-
dollars as well because we're long enough that they know, oh, I can go here to watch something.
Yeah.
But who's going to be responsible for things like people's interests in this to begin with, to create that demand first? Because right now we haven't met that yet.
Yeah, my take is kind of that, right? It's like I feel, sure, there is, but if we're going to judge this metric on the fact that it can then bring in the dollars, or it can be sustainable, which to me is a more important word, the fact that if I do become an artist, I can sustain myself through art, right? That in its essence is, I don't feel like we're fully there yet, right? And it's still going to take a while, where the moment like another, let's say, Singapore musical comes out, it becomes a staple name because it's happened quite a few times and we're just waiting for the next time to catch it again kind of thing, right? And it's not established enough yet.
But I also want to say, on a more hopeful note, if you compare the space maybe 10 years ago to now, we've come quite far,
Yeah.
Very.
which gives me hope about the future. And I do think that arts and culture in Singapore has a bright future ahead.
No, I think it was a very passionate debate on both ends, and everyone brought up great points, and I thought it was a very good debate.
Yeah. I think my takeaway from this is that I really need to go and sign up for the financial literacy course after this talk. But also, I agree, right? Like, at the end of the day, to be honest, I think that we may not be there yet. Wherever there is, it's an ambiguous space. But I think we are on the road towards. And I think it's really exciting to be in this space together with people who believe in that future.
I agree.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest weakness for our art scene here, right, is that it's just not on mainstream awareness enough. And that comes from all sides, whether it's us as the people who are going, we don't post about it enough, we don't talk about it enough, or it's the production side who are not marketing it strong enough, right?
there's
Because
that
there
too.
are really, right, okay, we're
No,
off.
I agree with you.
We're
I
done
agree
with
with you.
the debating,
Yeah.
right? So I can say whatever now.
Say whatever.
Like, it's freaking fantastic, the stuff that we have out there. but not enough people know about it.
It's
right?
true.
I really think that's one thing.
I agree with you.
I
Especially as
100%
content creators, right?
Yeah.
We see like this show is amazing. Why didn't I hear anything about this on social media,
That
right?
happens. It's like
Yeah.
once like the whole production is over already, then
And
we're
like,
like, yeah, wow, I want to go.
Because it
like,
has to
why
do
not
with
go?
timeline also, ma. If it
Yeah.
only has 2 weeks, by the time it catches the wave, it's done.
Yeah.
I think-
It's like I just feel like maybe during production or something they should be posting more behind
Yes,
the scenes
that's
or whatever
exactly what I
it is,
think.
right?
I think they are going by traditional like ways of doing it, where you
Yep.
know the actors just prepare and then we do the show. But then
No,
now it's like maybe we could put a social media campaign right before it happens.
But you know something, baby, I have to say something on behalf of these companies that I feel are really trying their best is because of resources. It takes a dedicated person
I
to
know,
be
I know.
able to put
For
content
sure,
out like
for
that.
sure.
I
So
know.
I encourage all content creators, volunteer your time at a theatre company. Lie.
Okay, so as a content creator, right, I actually have worked for a theatre company to try and help them with this before, and I can agree with you that the resources thing, right, is really a huge thing. Resources cannot not just money, it can be time.
Yes.
Time to hire actors to block out time to make these social media posts.
Yeah.
Time for people to even plan out the content plan or approve it. You know, it's all resources. It all comes down to
Yep, yep.
resources. Yeah.
Can I just add one point? I'll say on the vice versa, right?
Yeah.
That we also shouldn't have so much reject towards foreign imports. Because personally, right, I'm an immigrant, right? My parents are both immigrants here, my parents here are both immigrants as well. And both of them are Singapore Symphony Orchestra players. I feel that having cultural imports is exactly why we can continue progressing. That
Yeah.
we keep learning
Of
from
course,
other
yes.
elements
Yeah.
where success has become
It's
and other
true,
talents
yes.
overseas. That's how we continue to grow.
course.
Yeah.
I
And
think-
that's
yeah.
what Singapore is lah. We are really
Yeah.
this gigantic national rojak. And that's the beauty of it also.
Yeah.
So yeah, in both sides. Local, support more local, but foreign also support lah.
Like,
Just it's
you know,
really
we
a
all
whole
love
country
good art
thing.
regardless of where it comes from.
It's
It should be
true.
a colorful, like artistic industry. Yeah.
Art is for everyone, and I really
Yeah.
hope that we all go out to continue supporting local and foreign productions.
Yes.
Thank you guys for today's discussion, and of course, thank you for catching this video. Make sure you watch the next Bloomer Pulse episode coming up, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. We'll catch you again next time. Bye!
Bye.
Wait, so who won?